Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Raw Podcast. My name is James Copley. This is also going out live on YouTube and Facebook. I'm delighted this evening to be joined by my good friend, Michael Bowers. We're going to be doing a little bit of a live Q&A, taking some listener and reader questions, getting stuck into all the topics. Michael, long day for you. How's it been?
Pretend you haven't been on my channel already. But yeah, I am not doing too badly. Went to the Lasses Derby game. Which obviously less said about that, the better, I suppose. But yeah, I'm not doing too badly. And I've just seen that England have won 8 games in the group stage for the World Cup qualifiers, so I really care about that too much. But yeah, you doing all right?
I did wonder whether we should be doing this in and around the same time as the internationals, but then I realised nobody's really bothered.
Cares too much about England apart from it's not a tournament.
Well, we've got a fair few comments already. So hello, Paul. Hello, Ian.
And another Ian.
Great. And another Ian, yeah. I don't know if it's the same. Is it the same Ian? No, it can't be. So 2 Ians, 2 Pauls.
Just called Ian on here, and the other one's Ian Brown. So I would assume that unless it's one person who's got 2 different devices on each account, then I don't know.
I wonder if that's the Ian Brown. I don't think so somehow. But we've got 2 Pauls: Paul Armstrong, Paul Crampton, Ian Brown, a different Ian, and somebody called Coffee Goblin as well. Darren Cole, obviously in the chat as well. He was in yours this morning, Bowers. So welcome to everybody. We're going to get stuck in, Michael, to some questions. First one comes from Jack Dunn on Twitter. You can also get your comments in on Facebook and YouTube comments now. They'll come through to us. But Jack Dunn says, Michael, how should we approach the January window? What key positions do we need to be focusing on? Do we aim for the top 10 or Europe? It's a good question.
Sounds like it's like 5 questions rolled into one tweet. But thank you very much, Jack. It is appreciated. Right, so the first one. What was the first bit about the January window?
Yeah, where should we strengthen, basically, was the gist of it.
Everywhere if we can. Simple answer. I think probably the only area that I could maybe think of is possibly wingers, maybe another bit of top flight depth in midfield. And when I say in midfield, I'm more talking to the level of Diarra or Siddiqui. But you know, it's a balancing act, isn't it? Because you don't want to upset the apple cart too much by bringing too many people in, but you also want to keep, but you also want to upgrade wherever you can. So if I had to nail down one position, probably winger for me. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think sort of nailing down a really, really strong right winger might be a good idea. I know Sunderland have a few options there. Talby can play there, but he's looked better to me off the left. Obviously, Traore's there, and he's looked solid, hasn't he? But I think that's the one position for me on the right wing. I know Simon Adingra can play there as well, but
that's the one position there, though. I'm guessing is what you mean.
Yeah, that's the one position for me where it hasn't maybe gone as well as we would have liked. And that's no slight, really, actually, because it's gone pretty well generally, but I think basically what I'm saying is I don't feel like anybody's really nailed that right wing spot yet. Even Traore, as good as he's been in a defensive sense, he hasn't really shown too much in terms of his attacking output yet, but it's still very early days and he's got a lot of time to go. Second part of that question from Jack, though, Bowers, was should we be aiming for the top 10 and or Europe? Now, we had a little discussion about this morning, and 8th place could feasibly get you into Europe if there are 5 Champions League spots and the Cups all go to top 6 teams. So that's an interesting question.
Well, if you believe what James said on my channel, then believes we could be finishing 8th this year. Well, apart from the cliche, you aim as high as you want to finish, I think KLD's comments suggest that we're looking at top 10. I know he didn't specifically say it like I want to finish in the top 10 or imply it would be a failure otherwise. Me personally, and again, it's the boring answer that I'm pretty sure people won't like, but to me, it's get the 40 points first and foremost, and then we go from where we'll then see where we go from there, basically. But if assuming we get the 40 points, which I'd like to hope we'll have enough to do, certainly over the season, then I would say top half, maybe, if we can. You know, but it just all depends, really, because the other caveats that you got to bear in mind is injuries or obviously, from the Jacker and Siddiqui yellow card thing, I don't know if there's going to be a question about that. There probably will be. But, you know, it all depends on a load of mitigating factors. But I would say for me, 40 points first. But if you're asking me a single position, top half would be lovely if we got it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's any reason why Sunderland fans shouldn't dream. I think that's part of being a football fan, isn't it? You always want to be looking upwards. Sunderland have had an excellent start of the season. You know, to have that many points after 11 games, having beaten Chelsea, you know, haven't gone toe-to-toe with Arsenal, it's hugely encouraging, but it is a long old season. I think for every Sunderland fan, we are hardwired, aren't we, to avoid relegation. I remember when we were doing quite well under Tony Mowbray in that championship season where the football was really fun and there was an outside shot of the playoffs. And we were doing better than expected, really, coming up from League One. But everybody was delighted when mathematically we couldn't get relegated anymore. So I think that's the aim. And actually, when I spoke to Dan Ballard after the Arsenal game, which was a really good chat, which you can read on the Sunderland Echo, some shameless cross-promotion there. Well, not cross-promotion. This is a Sunderland Echo channel. But
I was going to say you're plugging it on a channel associated with the same newspaper, effectively.
I didn't.
Feel free to watch content that is relevant to this, please.
I didn't quite get my words around the right way there. But when I spoke to Dan Ballard after the Arsenal game, I asked him, how far can the Sunderland team go? And he sort of reiterated that the main aim was to stay in the division. Now, he might be being quite coy by saying that he might not want to raise expectations, but I think sort of internally, as you say, with Kira Louis-Dreyfus, I think they'd like a little bit more. Whether that looks like Europe, I'm not too sure. You never know, because it's I wouldn't say it's easy to get into Europe, but it's easier, isn't it, with the three competitions, England having such a good coefficient with UEFA, the fact that the big six teams usually win the cups. So you never know. I can't see it. Anyway, Michael, we're going to tackle some of the comments from YouTube because we've got a couple flying in at the moment. I'm just going to sort of go chronologically. This one's an interesting one, actually, from Hodgson. Is Diarra going to AFCON or can we keep him? What are your thoughts on that, Michael? Because it's my understanding that he should be back sometime in December, but I guess if he isn't, then there's a chance that he could miss AFCON. I mean, they might take him anyway, just on the off chance that he's fit at some point in the tournament. His nation will be expected to be going quite far, I would imagine. But I guess there's an outside shot that he doesn't go.
Well, I hope that it depends, really, because on the one hand, I want him to come back in the fold for the Newcastle game, but also if he's not going to be back in the fold, then I wouldn't complain if he was out injured for another couple of weeks and there's no point in him going to AFCON. Yes, I'm thinking about that far too much. But if I had to look at Diarra, I think he still goes, personally. I think there's any chance of him being remotely fit. I just can't see. I can't see his teammates in the national team. He's not wanting him there. I can't see.
And he'll want to go as well. He'll be desperate to go.
Of course he will. So put it this way, mate, I hope he does stay, but I'd be pretty surprised if he did.
Yeah, I concur. Next question comes from Ian. Do any of our players have relegation clauses in contracts?
You're going to have to answer that one because I have no clue.
I would be stunned if the majority. I would be very surprised if the majority of players at Sunderland didn't have some sort of relegation contract, whether that's a cut in wages or that they can leave for an agreed fee. I think Christian Speakman was asked about this in the summer as part of one of the structured dialogue meetings with Red and White Army. I think the minutes got released on this as well. And I think they did state that, I think Christian Speakman used the words sort of, don't worry, we know what we're doing. We're not going to sort of financially hamstring this club. And I think what we've seen from Sunderland over the years in terms of finances has been quite sensible, hasn't it? This splurge that we saw in the summer was as a result of some pretty prudent financial planning in the Championship, wasn't it? That's what's given us the platform to spend so much. So I would be shocked and surprised if Sunderland haven't taken measures to negate for the worst. As I say, I don't think they're aiming for the worst at all. I think they're aiming for something quite special this season. Yeah. And if you fall short, then you fall short, but you won't get relegated. So I would be absolutely stunned if the decision makers have set us up for a fall on that one, to be honest.
And to be fair as well, it would be naive of them not to prepare for the worst case scenario. What's the phrase? Prepare for the worst, hope for the best. That's kind of the
100%. Yeah.
That's what they'll be living by. I'm sure of it. Unless they're so confident we wouldn't go down that we weren't going to bother with relegation clauses, but I don't think they'd be that stupid. So Jack Rodwell contract's the example for that. But if you look, these guys, I do trust these guys. I trust that they know what they're doing now. I think they do from the majority of the fan base, to be honest. I think if you didn't put relegation clause in there, it can cripple you, because then not just in terms of leaving for certain fees or whatever, but it means that the wages then don't decrease, which then increases the money you're spending a month on wages, and that would not help your PSR situation, shall we say? So I don't know myself, but just trying I can't get my words out either. Trying to make what I would also consider an educated guess. I'm with you. I'd be astonished if certainly the new players that come in, if a majority of them don't have relegation clauses, then yeah, I'd be very surprised as well.
I think as well what we've seen over the years with the Sunderland and what we've been told about contracts is they're very heavily incentivised. So you are very, very heavily incentivised to do well, particularly in the Championship. There was a lot of promotion bonuses, wage raises if Sunderland were to get promoted, because you want to incentivise your players to do well. And I don't think that's changed coming into the Premier League. Now, if you're incentivise players, you also have to sort of cover yourself in the other direction, don't you? So if everybody underperforms, then there has to be some sort of give. So yeah, that's my gut feeling. I mean, I haven't seen every Sunderland player's contract. That would be quite extraordinary
behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah, that would be quite extraordinary information. But my good feeling, as you say, Bowers, would be that Sunderland have taken contingencies. The next question's an interesting one, actually. We could be on it for a while. Phil Peacock says, "Hi guys, do you think Dan Neil will still be at SAFC by the end of the season?" That's a big one.
Me and James used to be in a group chat with a bunch of lads that I used to do podcasts with, and I made the point constantly, probably it was since the summer of 2024, so 18 months ago, I was making the point when he still had 2 years left, why has his contract not been sorted yet? And look, obviously a lot of it we don't know behind the scenes circumstances. I don't know them. It could be Dan Neil might want certain guarantees in terms of play time. It could be a financial wage thing. It could be a multitude of factors. As we've said, I'm not privy to. I'm certainly, James might be, I don't know, but I'm definitely not privy to any of these sort of conversations about the direction, the way the wind's blowing effectively. My gut at this point says no. I think he'll either be sold in January or, which I think is the more likely option, I think he leaves for free at the end of the season. And to be fair, I mean, I know there's a lot of Sunderland fans that don't, and there's many that really don't rate Dan Neil, and I think it's personally, I disagree with that. I think Dan Neil has been, you can say, okay, it wasn't great in the playoff final, but I think you can't dismiss the contribution that he made. And bear in mind, I don't get the argument he can't play as a 6B either. Personally, I think he can, but maybe that's just me. Maybe I'll just die on the minority there. But I think as well, if he's not signed a contract by this point, I'm not personally convinced, unless something drastically changes, that you'll sign one in the next 6 months. But, if you know something I don't, then fair enough. But I personally think he'll leave for free in the summer.
I think we have to safely assume that contract talks are at a quite serious impasse, don't we? The very nature of it having not been sorted yet, there must be some sort of discrepancy between the club and Dan Neil in terms of probably money, because contracts are usually down to money at the end of the day, but there's probably also a little bit of role and status. Dan Neil has lost the captaincy. He hasn't eaten Granit Xhaka. He can't really have too many complaints about that, because Granit Xhaka is Granit Xhaka. I do feel for Dan Neil on that, because it's brutal, isn't it? It's brutal, but you can't say it's the wrong decision, because Sunderland are fourth in the league at the moment. Would they be fourth in the league with Dan Neil playing every game instead of Granit Xhaka and captain? Perhaps, but probably not. They might still have picked up points. They might still have done well, but Granit Xhaka is a world-class midfielder who finished, 16th in the Ballon d'Or listings at one point in his career, has been invincible. So it's very difficult for Dan Neil. I'm with you, Bowers. I sympathise with him. I love him as a player. He's one of my favourite ever Sunderland players. I think he's only, 23, 24. He's a double promotion winner. He's played with us all through the divisions. He's lived and breathed Sunderland. He's put his soul into the club. So it does feel brutal. I can't see him staying beyond next summer. I think it'll be sad when he does go. Sad but happy in a sense that we've brought this academy lad through and he's achieved something massive with us, and our thanks should go to him, I believe. I think the interesting one is, would it happen in January? Would a team come in and pay some money? Would Sunderland then bring in another midfielder? Will they manoeuvre that soon? I'm not sure. But I do happen to think that in the next few weeks, Dan Neil might get an opportunity. We've got Xhaka and Siddiqui on 4 yellow cards. Obviously, you've got AFCON coming up. So surely there'll be the odd game here and there for Dan Neil. It's interesting, isn't it? Because Régis Le Bris is brutal and Dan Neil has been a very, very good asset to Sunderland, hasn't he? And one of Le Bris's favourites last season. But the nature and the sort of the speed at which he's sort of been dispatched and pushed to one side has been quite jarring, hasn't it? And he's been coming on for the last 5-10 minutes in games, so it's not like he's been playing a prominent role off the bench. I thought it was telling when Habib Diarra got injured. Le Bris preferred Chris Rigg a little bit further forward, didn't he? I thought that was sort of very telling as to where Dan Neil's, where Régis Le Bris's mind is over Dan Neil. But I do think it's a shame, Bowers. I really do. As I say, I can't argue with the logic, but as I said on your stream this morning, you get attached to these players, don't you? Especially when they've achieved something good for you. With him being a local lad as well. I mean, I was pitch side with him after the Coventry City second leg semi-final, and he couldn't believe what had happened. It was incredible. His eyes were glazed. He was, he couldn't believe it. And his dad actually came down, and to see him share that moment with his dad and hug each other, and it was a real nice story. And first local Sunderland player to lift a trophy. I know it's only the league, the championship playoff final trophy, but the first person to do that since Reg Carter in 1937 in terms of being a local lad. So he goes down as, a modern day Sunderland favourite, maybe even a legend in 20, 30 years' time, who knows. But I find the situation sad. A part of me hopes it works out for him.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm the same, of course. I mean, I think that the big thing for Dan Neil is, look, even if you want to, look, what's the obvious thing when you talk about, say, sporting directors or head coach or whatever, are you leaving the club in a better place than when you came in? Now, ultimately, yeah, Dan Neil, of course, is by default to some degree through being in the academy, but he still walked into the first team with us having languished, at the point he came in, we'd been in League One for 3 seasons when he started playing. So if, say, he did leave in the summer and, say, Sunderland stayed up this season, then not only he would have entered the Sunderland first team in League One and left it with us being in the Premier League, and if we stay up, then a chance of becoming really established again. And I think
that's just reminded me something as well, Bowers. That's just unlocked something in my head. But at the time Dan Neil was breaking through, maybe 2 or 3 years before that, we saw a complete fire sale of youngsters within the Academy of Light, led by Stuart Donald and Charlie Methven. Now, a lot of those youngsters wanted to go because Sunderland were in League One. A lot of them were sort of pushed out the door and sold to the likes of Liverpool, Arsenal. Sam Greenwood went, Logan Pye, Joe Hugill to Manchester United. All of these types of players. Barley Mumba ended up going as well. Dan Neil and Anthony Patterson refused to go. They said, we're staying at Sunderland, we want to break into the first team. And I think that's probably a little bit of the story, particularly of those two players, that does get a little bit lost at times. We maybe forget that actually these lads have shown brilliant loyalty to Sunderland. Yes, they've been rewarded financially. Yes, it's benefited them because they've broken through into a team in League One and they've been able to grow with it. But for me, particularly with those two players, to come through the academy and to have an impact on the first team is a special story. And I think they deserve credit for actually sticking around when times were tough. Everybody, pretty much everybody else left around that time. It was a complete and utter fire sale of Sunderland's academy, which was, coming out of the Premier League and the Championship into League One. It was still actually quite strong. But a lot of those players left. It's not many of them have actually gone on to do what was expected of them when they left. There's not many who've really, really excelled, and you do wonder whether some of those players, going off on a little bit of a tangent, regret sort of leaving Sunderland because they would have had opportunities at some point.
Well, of course, there would have been. No, don't get me wrong, I don't have the same animosity. In fact, I don't have any animosity towards Stuart Donald. I know a lot of Sunderland fans do, and I can understand that's their opinion. But you can't. But also, it was a fire sale. It was a lot of talent that was sold. Obviously it was annoying to see as a Sunderland fan. So for Dan Neil and Anthony Patterson if that is true, then to have had them both pretty much adamantly stay then, when the club was in its worst period of its history. Etienne, I like your thinking, but we'll wait and see. But with Daniel, but it is sad. If Daniel does leave, then of course it is. But at the very least, I don't think, even those who don't rate him, I don't rate Daniel, I don't think should really be able to say that he hasn't contributed, because ultimately he's been part of the squad that's got us back to where we belong. At least as far as I believe we belong anyway. Obviously, no one has a God-given right to be anyway. You've got to earn it. But Daniel was part of that. And I think it is a shame, really. But on the other hand, to flip it for Dan Neil, if he did go in the summer, then say again, assume we stay up and he goes in the summer, I think he wouldn't be short of suitors, in my opinion. There'll be a host of Championship, if he wants to drop back down to the Championship, which I suspect he probably would if he's not playing regularly now. He'll want a chance to go and prove himself again. And I think if he did again, if we stayed up and he left, then for me there'll be a host of Championship clubs after Dan Neil, and he would have a lot of. I think he'd have a really good amount of suitors in that regard. So yeah, like you said, it is a shame with what's happened. And the thing for me personally that I also think is a bit of a shame, really, in that sense, it's not, and it sounds maybe a bit unfair to Dan Neil, but to me it was more of this was an opportunity to gain clear profit on PSR. And that's kind of why I thought, well, if he signed the contract, say, a year ago, then obviously I know he didn't, but if he signed a contract a year ago and then say one way or another, whether we went up or didn't go up, then it's clear profit and it can help you with your PSR situation. But, I think Sunderland's PSR situation, from what I've seen, seems to be in a pretty good position anyway. So, you'd like to think that we should be all right in that front. But yeah, I think you are right as well, though, what you said earlier about Dan Neil. I think will get opportunities in the first team when it comes to AFCON, when it comes to, even if he's not starting, he'll probably, you'd like to think he'll come off the bench a fair amount. And I think that I'll be fascinated to see how this plays out personally. But I just think if it's got to this point and he still hasn't signed a contract, I just think he's going to leave in the summer. But if he does, at least he's been part of a team that's got 2 promotions. And if we stay up, has left us in a far better place than when he was in the first team.
I completely agree. This question from Chris Holland sort of covers the ground we've gone over, but he throws in the Dennis Serkin question as well, where there's a lot of parallels, Bowers, isn't there, between the two. Dennis Serkin's out of contract in the summer also. He's a player that I really like, another double promotion winner. And again, with AFCON looming, Sunderland's 2 left-backs, Reinildo Mandava and Arthur Masuaku, are set to go to AFCON. Dennis Serkin's coming back into fitness. I've watched him play twice for the under-21s in recent weeks, and he's looked decent. He scored and got an assist the other night against Athletic Club Bilbao at the Stadium of Light. He might be in line for some minutes. I know Trey Hume can play left-back, and Nodi Mukwele playing right-back could be an option with Alderete and Dan Ballard in the middle. But for me, there's a big opportunity there for Dennis Serkin if he can remain fit, which is something which has troubled him.
Yeah, it's a shame, really, isn't it? But I think Serkin's injury record, was not too bad last season. Really, I can't remember. I think it was one spell he was out for a little while, but I think in general he's not been too bad last season. Anyway, obviously a couple of years before that he had a fair few injuries. But again, it's the same principle. Like when Dennis Serkin came in, it was more like when he was signed for the club again, we were in League One, and at least now, a few years down the 3.5 years down the line, we're back in the Premier League. So I think with Serkin, it's a funny one because I like Serkin a lot, and I think when we were in the Championship, I thought he was one of the best left backs of the division. I really did rate Dennis Serkin very, very highly, but he hasn't featured, has he? Obviously, because he's just been the problem I've got with Dennis Serkin. Really, it's not a problem with him really, but it's more. I think he seems to constantly get these niggly injuries that constantly keep recurring. And when it seems like he could be, say, for example, if we hear he's out for 2 months, that to me then sometimes turns to 3 months, then turns to a bit longer. But that's not a Serkin exclusive thing, though. That's happened with Sunderland quite a few times. We go, someone's out for 2 weeks, then it turns to 6 weeks, effectively. So, but that's probably just a Sunderland thing. With Serkin, I think it's a similar principle to Dan Neil, really, that if his contract's not been, I think there's. Don't ask me why, but my gut says there's more chance of Serkin signing a new contract than Neil, but that could be me talking out my backside. I have no idea. So, but I think, again, even if he leaves and we stay up, then it's the same principle as Neil. They both came into the team when we were in League One, and they've left if we stay up this season, we're an established Premier League team again.
Just out of interest, Bowers, and this is a question which has just popped into my head, but having seen Arthur Masuaku play for Sunderland and having seen Dennis Serkin play for Sunderland, if you had to put your life on one of them starting tomorrow, both fully fit, who would it be?
Although they both play left back, they've got different attributes to me. Masuaku, I think, can deliver a decent ball going forward, and I'm basing this just off the Forest. The Forest game is the one that stands out most in my memory. I think Masuaku at Forest was going forward, put some decent crosses into the box. But I thought he was very suspect defensively. Now, the caveat, to be fair to him, is that he was up against a really, really good winger for Forest that day. So I do believe that, because I'm someone who thinks that he builds success from the back, I'm probably going to be biased and go Dennis Serkin. But it all depends. But the caveat is, though, I've not seen Serkin at Premier League level, so I can't judge how. The caveat is I can't judge really how he's going to do.
And Masuaku, we haven't really seen a lot of, have we? We've seen him in fits and starts.
That's the thing, but I suppose the difference between them is that Masuaku has played at Premier League level, even if it's not with Sunderland. He obviously did pretty well for West Ham, I think. So if you're asking me based on the attributes I personally like, I'd say Dennis Serkin. But it's kind of a 55-45 split in favour of Serkin. If you know what I mean, it's not like a one emphatic over the other. But not to beat around the bush, and I'll actually answer your question. I'll go Dennis Serkin if I had to pick out the two of them.
Yeah, I would probably go Dennis Serkin as well. We've got another question from YouTube. There are rumours of Patterson going out on loan. I assume we're after another goalkeeper then. Bowers, go first on this and I'll come in off the back of you.
We'll be in for another goalkeeper. Well, maybe. Well, I mean, there's been room. I think someone else put in the chat on YouTube, and I think it was Coffee Goblin said that he's basically said if Patterson goes in January, Marty Young will be recalled. Well, possibly. Why did I say Marty Young? Matty Young, sorry. Don't know why I said Matty Young. There you go. I'm inventing players. We'll call Marty Young, keep Matty Young out on loan. Well done, Michael. I would say personally that if you're gonna, it's a balancing act because again, Anthony Patterson probably deserves better than not playing. But I view Patterson as, and maybe this makes no sense because I haven't seen him play in the Premier League, but I do think I get the impression Patterson's a high-end Championship keeper, and I'm not convinced as such that he's a Premier League one. I think he's a decent keeper. I think he's a good shot stopper. I think he's better at coming for crosses than people make him out to be. But if you compare him to Robin Roofs, for me, it's no contest personally. And that's not a slight on Anthony Patterson. That's just the nature of it when we're getting up to the Premier League. But yeah, I would be surprised unless Matty Young gets recalled in January, which I personally think would be a mistake. I think he needs to go out and continue playing constantly. Then I would imagine you'd be silly not to be looking in the market for another goalkeeper. But it depends on who's available, really. I can't imagine Patterson would go out on loan unless we get somebody in. Unless, of course, Matty Young gets recalled from Salford.
Yeah, so I think there are a few parts to this. Obviously, Anthony Patterson's a local lad. He cares deeply about the club. He's been on the same journey as Dan Neil. I don't think he would like to leave it on this note. Interestingly enough, I did hear that Patterson was going to start the season, or the plan was for him to start the season. But because of the injury that he had during the summer, it set him back a little bit. The plan was for him to battle it out with Robin Roofs for the number one jersey. Robin Roofs got the nod because of how well he'd done in pre-season, although he came in late in pre-season, how well he trained, and just because Anthony Patterson was a little bit further behind the group. Now, Robin Roofs has come in and he's been absolutely superb, so I don't think even Anthony Patterson could really argue against it because what a signing he's been, and he's come up with penalty saves and all sorts. So I think that's interesting. For me, in terms of Anthony Patterson leaving in January, Sunderland don't tend to stand in the way of players that want to go. However, I don't think they go the rest of the season without Simon Moore, with just Robin Roofs, Simon Moore, and Blondie, because you're leaving yourself a little bit short just in case the worst was to happen and Robin Roofs was to get injured. So I think they'd still like a talented understudy, which is what Anthony Patterson is at the moment. So if he was going to be allowed to leave, they'd have to get somebody in of the same caliber. Now, Matty Young is a very, very talented goalkeeper, but he's probably not ready to be that yet. He's probably not ready to play in the Premier League yet. He's best served at Salford for another season. So I think that would disrupt his development. And that's why I can't really see it happening in January unless Sunderland can source a replacement. Now, my gut feeling is at the moment that Sunderland would probably have bigger fish to fry in January in terms of the positions they want to be looking to strengthen, in terms of the money they would like to spend as well. If you just think of it logically, why go and spend 9 or 10 million on another goalkeeper when you can just keep that situation the same for another 6 months, when you might be looking at splashing out on 1 or 2 additions in, on that right wing spot that we mentioned. So for me at the moment, I guess it's up in the air. It feels unlikely to me currently because a lot would have to happen for that to make sense. Someone would have to bring a replacement in. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think you can rule it out just because I think Patterson will have suitors as well. I agree with you. I think most teams in the Championship would take it because of his record. And another player, really, his contribution sometimes gets overlooked. Wycombe Wanderers, League One playoff final, produces a fantastic save from Sam Vokes. And he did it twice against Sheffield United, didn't he, at Wembley? 2 brilliant
Moore
saves.
And Andrew Brooks, wasn't it?
Yeah, 2 brilliant saves. I know he's had his detractors over the years. Some of it fair as well, it has to be said. There are elements of his game that are perhaps are lacking. And I think really seeing Robin Roofs in a Sunderland jersey has underlined that, hasn't it? Because what Anthony Patterson lacks, Robin Roofs does well. So I think that's really hammered home the areas in which Patterson needs to improve. But that saying, similar to Dennis Serkin and Dan Neil, he's a player that's, I have a lot of respect for, a lot of time for, double promotion winner. Like Dan Neil, he's come up through the club's academy. So if he was to leave, I would be gutted, I think, because I've enjoyed his rise. But But again, it speaks to that brutal nature of football, doesn't it, Bowers?
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Yeah, and I think for a lot. I mean, but the thing is, we're talking about players that again have delivered for us last season massively, and like you said with Anthony Patterson, yes, there are elements to his game that are questionable, obviously. And when you compare him to someone like Robin Roofs, it's obviously quite clear who's the better goalkeeper. But ultimately, I just think without Anthony Patterson's like 2 massive saves at Wembley, we're not here. We're not having this discussion. We're not having this conversation. I think obviously there was rumours about the 2 clubs that were rumoured were Leicester and Southampton, but obviously that's rumours. You know how much substance there is in that, I don't know. I think there'll be again like with Dan Neil, and if say Serkin was to go, I think there'll be a host of Championship clubs after Anthony Patterson. But the only way I could, in terms of who, if we brought in a goalkeeper, one thing I could potentially see happening, and again it's just me trying to put 2 and 2 together and getting 6, but I would say that I could see us going maybe as a loan deal for a 3rd choice goalkeeper off someone like a Liverpool or an Arsenal, or someone who maybe they might want to just get their wages off the books, or some of their wages off the books for a few months. Who that is, I don't know. So I could see it maybe that way. I think if Anthony Patterson was to go, James, I have a feeling it might be towards the back end of the window. If anyone becomes available as a loan option for a goalkeeper to then become 2nd choice with Sunderland, then Patterson might be allowed to go out and get some more minutes. But I don't know. The January window is strange because you could look like nothing's going to happen, and then, as I'm sure you know yourself, in the industry you work in, within about the last 24 hours, everything just goes and then it just explodes completely. So who knows? Maybe everything I'm going to say is going to be totally irrelevant come the 1st of January.
Yeah, we call it silly season for a reason. We've got a question from Darren Cole over on YouTube. Off the back of this about Anthony Patterson and Dan Neil and Dennis Serkin, who do you think will leave in January? Now we'll go through the squad. I'll give you defenders first. I'll give you defenders first, Michael, and then maybe you can tap midfielders, and we'll do it that way. But I'm just looking at the squad. Just looking at the squad list now, and in terms of defenders, you've got Leo Hjelde, potentially, probably needs a loan at some point. Timothy Pembele needs to go out. Zach Johnson, promising young player, but is he going to play in the Premier League? No. Aji Alisi is a player who I really, really, really love, and he's versatile and he's a really, really good footballer. But is he going to play at Sunderland in the Premier League unless there are serious injuries? I'm not sure. Would I like to see him get a chance at some point? Yeah, maybe I would. And then you also have somebody like Joe Anderson, who didn't play for us in the Championship. So I'm very skeptical whether he could do a job in the Premier League. In fact, I'm not even sure. I don't even know if he's registered, actually. I'll have to double check that. But those would be the defenders for me, candidates that could leave. I don't see anybody like a Luke O'Nien leaving or anything like that. I think he's too important behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So that would be it for me.
Right.
I guess Dennis Serkin might be a candidate if the right bid was to come in and Sunderland felt that they could cope without another left-back, or they signed somebody else. I'm not quite sure how that would work. Again, like Patterson, a lot would have to fall into place. But those are the defenders anyway.
Yeah. Okay, well, as far as midfielders go on here, so if anything's wrong on here, you can blame Sunderland's website. But, yeah. And my guts, if I'm just basing off my gut feeling, I think everyone in the midfield stays that's on this list, apart from the likes of Abdullah Bar, Jamie Tetty, and Harrison Jones. And I'd have thought Abdullah Bar would be a winger more than a forward more than a midfielder. But if I'm basing it off this, I think Dan Neil stays. I don't think he'll want to leave in January. Obviously, Chris Rigg, I think he'll be very important when AFCON comes around. And he's been quite, and actually, to be fair, to quickly touch on Chris Rigg, I think he's actually been very good so far when I've seen him play. I felt for him against Aston Villa, but because of that red card to Reynildo, he was the victim of circumstance that had to be sacrificed to give us more solidity, which is a shame for him. Habib Diarra, obviously, your main lot like Diarra, Siddiqui, Lafay, Xhaka, none of them, unless you count them getting injured for the rest of the season, and that's them leaving the squad. But in terms of leaving the club, no, probably not. I think Abdullah Bar, Jamie Tetty, and Harrison Jones, I think they're the 3 that I could see going. I think Harrison Jones would go on loan probably. And I think the other 2, we would try and find permanent suitors for them. And I'm quite surprised, like Jamie, that not many League One clubs went in for Jamie Tetty. Unless it's a wage issue that he's on wages at Sunderland that are still going to be way higher than anything he's on would have been on in other League One clubs. But I'm pretty sure he's on the contract we signed him for in League One. So I can't imagine Jamie Tetty would be on that much. But so out of the midfielders, I would say personally, Bar, Tetty, and Jones, I think will go, and the rest stay basically.
Right, okay, nice. Let's have a look at the attackers. Are there any on this list?
I've got them here.
I've got Ahmed Abdullahi would probably be a candidate for a loan,
I'd
although
agree.
when I asked about him after the under-21s game, because he hasn't been seen for a couple of weeks, I think he's with the medical staff again. I'm not sure what the issue is, but he seems to get injured quite often, which is a shame because he's a really, really good player. I saw him score a hat-trick actually for the under-21s against Wolves last season. Really, really promising. I quite like him. Whether he'd come in and affect a Premier League squad, I'm not quite sure about that. The other one on this list would be Jan Poveda, who I would like to see leaving in January, obviously, but whether or not we can actually find a club that wants him or will pay money towards his wages.
I could think of a club that would want him, but whether they could afford his wages, I don't know. Sheffield Wednesday. I think that's
Sheffield Wednesday, yeah.
That to me, I mean, obviously, I know that was Danny Roll who signed him, and he's not there anymore. But that just to me screams Sheffield Wednesday on loan. Whether they can afford his wages, though, I don't know, because they're obviously in administration at the minute. They're probably pretty much in the middle of trying to get that club sold. So I don't know. It depends. I could see it happening if Sunderland were willing to pay majority of his wages, but obviously want to get some bang for their buck in terms of his wages. But I would say Poveda, Abdullahi on loan. I agree with you, and then I think the rest would stay pretty much. Okay, here's one. Let me put this into the room. Do you think that some of these players have become a victim of us getting promoted? And what I mean is, in the Championship, there's a lot, like, say, for example, I could have seen someone like Abdullahi being much closer at the first team if we were in the Championship rather than the Premier League, for instance.
100%.
You know what I mean? And it's the same thing with, like, who else is in this list? Yeah, you know, the likes of Leo Yelder to some extent. Adji Elise. Who else is here? Luke O'Nien obviously is another example. Obviously, you get the point. But I think some of these players, as great as promotion was for the club, and I'm so happy we did go up, like some of these players must have been selfishly thinking, oh, that's going to be much harder for me to get in the first team now, even if they did back themselves.
I think I would flip that as well, and I would say that Sunderland maybe have been a victim slightly financially of their own success as well, because a lot of these players like Joe Anderson, Jan Poveda, even the likes of Adji Elise, all of those types of players, they would have had promotion bonuses. So some of them would have had promotion wage increases as well. Some of them will have had two wage increases owing to promotion. So actually, to find a suitor for them in the summer window just gone, who's going to pay their full wage or contribute towards it, becomes really, really difficult. And I think that's probably some of the issue that Sunderland have had getting rid of the likes of particularly Poveda. I know they've got a fair few players out on loan, but there's a little bit of a bomb squad, isn't there, at the Academy of Light, which is sort of in no man's land, as you mentioned. And I think that's sort of the flip side of promotion, that sometimes it makes it actually quite difficult to get rid of some of these players.
Well, again, it's like with someone like, well, yeah, exactly. When you have someone on big wages, and then the clubs that might want these players from you can't afford the money that they're on, and the player doesn't have that incentive to drop down in wages. Can I just ask another? Here's one. Can I just ask another question? I want to see what you think about this. And this is something I could maybe see happening, but I haven't seen anyone mention it yet. If we were to go for another striker, could you see Mayenda being loaned out? And the reason I ask that is because when obviously scored, he was a great header against West Ham in the first game back, but since the miss at Burnley, he's barely featured, I think. And I do wonder. Obviously this depends on it. If Isidore or Brobbey get injured, then obviously not. But like, if say we had Isidore, Brobbey fit, and we went for another forward, I could see Sunderland loaning Mayenda out, depending if he wanted to, if he was wanting to go and play regular minutes, or am I looking too much into that?
I'm not sure.
Because I could see him staying as well. That's the thing.
I think it could be one of those that if it was to happen, it would go like late in the window, as you say. Yeah. It would obviously depend on who Sunderland brought in. Will they try and sign a striker in January? I'm not too sure. I think with Mayenda as well, he's going to be an option on the right-hand side during AFCON when Traore, Talby are away, Adingra is away. He's going to be one of the players that might get a little look. I sort of see him in a similar category to Chris Rigg. He's still young, but you want him around the group sort of learning and driving standards. I don't think it's time for either player yet really to go out on loan. Maybe it's next season if they do need to play regularly and their pathway suddenly becomes blocked by a different player, or the club feel they need to go out and get that experience. But for me, not this season. And I think, although he hasn't featured as much, I think that's probably down to Wilson Isidore's success and obviously Brian Brobbey coming to the fore as well. But I genuinely think Le Bris in particular, he really likes Mayenda and Chris Rigg, and I don't think he'd want to get rid of them in January. I just don't see it. And it's a lot of upheaval in the squad in January, isn't it? I mean, things things are going quite well. You don't necessarily want to rock the apple cart. Yes, you want to improve, but I don't think you need to be doing like major surgery in terms of the outgoings in this team for me.
No, that's fair enough. And I think you raised some fair points. I think it would be maybe the case that Le Bris might feel like a Rig or Mayenda do benefit from being around the first team. The good thing from our perspective is that both of them, I think Trey Hume's on this as well. I think their contracts are till 2030, aren't they? So that's huge. So it gives us the leeway to develop these players in ways that we deem good for them. So, yeah.
Well, and that's an excellent point that you raise as well, as that both Mayenda and Rig signed new deals in the summer. So the club clearly have a plan for them.
Exactly. So, and then even then, and again, the worst case scenario is if neither of these guys make it with, well, Rig I think would, but what I mean is if neither of these guys are with us for the next say 3-4 years, then their contracts are at the point where you could make a good bit of money on them for PSR at the very least.
Yeah.
But obviously it just depends what's good for these players as well. You know, sometimes opportunities come up for down the line. So. Like, what's this one from Victoria? Lads, do we take some tactical yellow cards to avoid suspensions from the Max game? Yeah, well, me and James talked about this on my channel this morning, but I think for me personally, I don't know what you think, James, I would like to say maybe have Siddiqui and Xhaka, because he'll be who she's referring to here. Siddiqui and Xhaka, maybe have them both play Fulham and Bournemouth, but then have Siddiqui get suspended against Bournemouth, and then Xhaka get suspended against Liverpool, and then that's a 3-game week. Then you can give them a bit of a breather, and then they're back for the Mags game. But that's me being a conspiracy theorist, probably.
Yeah, I can't see either of them being suspended for the Newcastle game. I think they'll both serve their one-match suspensions long before them. Taff made a good point, didn't he, ending on your stream this morning, that if we could get maybe Xhaka yellow carded after a last-minute winner against Liverpool,
we've
taking his shirt off or something.
It's fine.
Yeah, we'll absolutely take that. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to throw shade on anybody or question anybody's professionalism or say that these things happen in football, because they absolutely do. And to be fair, Xhaka and Siddiqui are such professionals that they're probably not even thinking about it, really. They'll just be concentrating on the next game. But do these things maybe get talked about in dressing rooms and behind the scenes? I would say absolutely, definitely. Let's have a look at the questions now.
I'll just to quickly ask you that, right? So here's what will happen then. Have Xhaka... This is asking a lot here. Say if Xhaka got suspension at Liverpool, for example, miss Man City. What if Siddiqui gets his 5th yellow card during the Newcastle game when he's going away to AFCON anyway?
Well, that would work. Yeah, that would certainly work. I would take it.
I mean, and then it's fine.
he's got a long time before that Newcastle game to get through. Yeah. How many games is that?
Essentially, I'm asking him to go 5 games without picking a booking up. That's a pretty big ask. Unless we happen to be in a game where we're ahead comfortably with half an hour to go. Right, take Siddiqui off so he doesn't get booked. Daniel.
We've got another question from Adam French, which speaks to a little bit of what we've talked about before. Do you think Patrick Roberts got shafted after what he did for the club? Obviously, he's out on loan at Birmingham City now. I think this is a really, really interesting question. Bowers, I'll give the floor to you. Then I do have some thoughts on this as well.
Okay. I know a bit of what your thoughts are, so that's fair enough. I think for me, so I was going to Roberts get shafted after what he did for the club. I'm trying not to beat around. I'm trying not to be too heartless here. I personally don't think Roberts would have cut it in the Premier League, if I'm honest. I think that now again, a lot of this is just gut feeling, because I obviously don't know definitively whether they're not good enough, because I haven't seen them given the chance to definitively show that they're not, even though that probably makes no sense. But the point is, I think Patrick Roberts is someone I would never accuse of shirking it at all. I think he was someone who grafted and grafted and grafted and grafted constantly, even if sometimes it meant that he couldn't affect the game in maybe ways he wanted to, but he did clearly care. And I know that people can say that should be a given, but sadly in football, I don't think it is a given anymore. It should be, but it isn't. So for me, I think when it comes to Roberts, I personally think the right decision was made to loan him out, but I can appreciate the sentiment in saying that he gets shafted, because I think there are times for me where Patrick Roberts' end product, for me, would not have been good enough to play regularly in the Premier League. Now, if he comes back, because you said they've got a year extension on his contract, is that right? After this
the club have an option to extend, which I imagine they will, because they'll probably be able to get some money from at some point. Won't be a great deal of money, won't be millions and millions, but it'll be a nice little...
Something's better than nothing, isn't it?
And it all adds into that PSR pot, as we've
Of course it does. So I think that if you're looking at Roberts, if he comes back next summer and we're still in the Premier League, and then he makes me look like a complete idiot next season, go for him. Fair play. I hope he does do that if that is the case. But I think personally, it also wouldn't have been fair to him to keep, and I think the club probably would have thought along these lines. I don't think it would have been fair to keep him here just to sit in the reserves. I think and I know that sounds a bit weird considering, Neil's probably doing that, Patterson's probably doing that, but I think Roberts is at the age now where he would want to be playing as regularly as possible. I think he's like 28, 29 at this point. So I think that he's someone I think who does deserve to be playing. And I think he's gone to a club in Birmingham who are clearly going to be ambitious this season in trying to get into the playoffs and the championship. Heck, who knows? Maybe if they have a really good run of form, top two, the way that the parachute teams have been going. But so I think personally, did he get shafted? I can see why some people think that, but I personally think the right decision was made to loan him out because I don't think personally he would have contributed as much in the Premier League, and I don't think it would have been fair to him either to sit here and not have the chance to play more.
Yeah, do I think he got shafted? No, I don't. And I really, really love Patrick Roberts. He's been one of my favourite Sunderland players. Again, another one of those double promotion winners. We wouldn't be where we are now if it wasn't for Patrick Roberts. He got that.
He turned the game on its head for me, by the way. Sorry to interrupt you. At Wembley, I thought.
Yeah, he did. He got that goal in the semi-final at Hillsborough, didn't he, against Sheffield Wednesday? All important goal. Jack Clark assist. Mad scenes, and then
most important in our recent history as well.
Exactly, and he turned the tide at Wembley, as you mentioned, and he got the assist, didn't he? So he contributed to Sunderland. His end product wasn't always there, but a more honest footballer I don't think you'll ever meet. That's what I always took away from the interviews that I did with Patrick Roberts. There was one when our form dipped and Joe Bellingham had got sent off last season, was away at QPR. We spoke to him afterwards and we were wondering whether Sunderland's blistering start was going to peter out and it was all going to sort of fall apart. I think it was like 3 or 4 draws on this spin or something like that. We weren't scoring. And he was really, really honest about it. And he didn't palm us off with platitudes. He was honest about Sunderland's performance. He said it wasn't good enough and he said that they needed to do better, especially with promotion being the aim. So I have a lot of respect for Patrick Roberts. And I think, again, it speaks to the real harsh reality and nature of top-level football because he hasn't done anything wrong. He's been a victim, really, of his own success. But with Sunderland 4th in the Premier League, as I mentioned with Anthony Patterson and Robin Roofs, you can't argue with the decision. When the decision was made, did I maybe think, is that the right thing to do? Should we just keep him around just maybe to see, how we do? Might we need him? I thought actually when he came on against Burnley when we were losing, he was actually quite good. But given the way Sunderland have played, given the way that attack's lined up, given that you need a little bit of pace in the Premier League, which is probably the one thing that Roberts does lack now is pure pace. Pace isn't everything, of course. You need skill on the ball, tactical awareness, but pace is hugely important in the Premier League. Can you say, in hindsight, with Sunderland 4th, that it was the wrong decision to let Patrick Roberts go? I don't believe so. And you touched on it, but he deserves immense credit because I was told he was sort of pushing for that move if he wasn't going to play because he wants to play football. He wants to earn his money. He didn't want to just be. He didn't just want to be sat around at the Academy of Light. As I said on your stream earlier, I'm very sentimental and protective of these players that have won 2 promotions with us. But I find it very hard to argue against that decision to let him go now.
No, and I think, again, it all just comes down to what his priorities were. And clearly it was playing football. And good on him because a lot of football these days is money driven. And what's probably helped that is that he probably thinks, well, I don't want to be on a contract to not play because he's pretty much had that in Man City when he was there. And obviously had to spend a lot of it out on loan. And I think he was on loan every 6 months to a season, really. So, yes, I think that it's one. But I think that's a fair point. Luxury have to give, but no, exactly. So that's what I mean. And so I think ultimately with Roberts, I think because, like I said, Roberts definitely cared, and I think he could tell that he was someone who really wanted to do well. And remember, Roberts took a chance on us effectively. I know his career had kind of petered out at that point, but he still dropped to a division that many people would consider. What's the word I'm looking for? Consider beneath his level, arguably, in terms of technical ability in League One. So he took a chance on us, we took a chance on him. So it's almost kind of a perfect storm, really, that, he helped us get promoted from League One. And then for 2.5 of the 3 championship seasons, he helped us be near the top of the division. So, you can't really complain with him for that. But I think ultimately, again, just from his perspective, it's good to see that he prioritised playing football. And that's fair enough. No complaints with him for that. And I suppose because I suppose I was going to say our loss is Birmingham's gain, but like where we are in the league, maybe not quite. Maybe that's not quite the right phrase, but Birmingham definitely will be beneficial from having him in the squad as opposed to not having him. I was going to say, I think you're on mute, mate.
Sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, and I would reiterate as well a really sort of nice, down to earth guy, and he came from a really nice family as well. I didn't speak to them like all of the time, but I had the pleasure just a couple of times after games to bump into his mum and dad, who used to read everything and sort of really engage with Sunderland's fan base, and they were just so happy that he'd found a home again and found a fan base that really loved him. And I think it's quite a nice story in that regard. What I will say though, that if you ever uttered the words Abdullah Bar is better than Patrick Roberts, then I can't take your football opinion seriously, as was the prevailing view at one point. Because that, for me, was just never should have been a thing ever. All respect to Abdullah Bar. He produced some half-decent moments for us. I know he won a game for us at Norwich, and I thought he had something at one point, but he was never a better footballer than Patrick Roberts. Might have been in better form at one point, but he was never a better player.
I was going to say, to in better form, I think at the end of the 23-24 season, the goal contribution stats would say Roberts got 1, Abdullah Bar got 7. But I know what you mean. That's very skewed, because if you're looking at it just in technical ability, Roberts wipes the floor with him. and I don't mind Abdullah Bar too much, but I think there's no way that Roberts technically, this is going to sound really strange, Roberts is technically one of the best footballers I've seen play for us, which is strange, really. But the problem for me is he's brilliant. He used to be really good until he entered the final third, and that was the problem, really. So it's weird, one of those things. But I do get the point. I remember that bit. It was absolutely hilarious.
I also feel as well Roberts has perhaps suffered from the age of football that we live in, and I'm guilty of it as well, but everything's about statistics, isn't it? Goal contributions, how many assists, how many goals. And a lot of times he was sort of the second assist, so the ball before the ball that gets played in, the assist of the assist, and he would put balls into the box, not necessarily getting an assist for it, but it would cause a little bit of chaos, his delivery from set players. And also, he used to come up with a fair amount of chances that weren't turned away. You think of that period under Mowbray where our striking options were Nasrus and Hamir. They weren't really prolific finishers of football, were they? Mason Burstow, exactly. I rest my case. So I think a lot of the time he actually suffered from arguably the personnel he was playing with as well, but how we sort of view football and success in football. And I think, I don't want to sound pretentious here, but to the learned eye, to somebody who watches the game and thinks about it, I think you're always going to recognise that Patrick Roberts is a really good footballer, even if sometimes his numbers do dip from time to time. And he would probably be the first to admit that he should score more goals and get more assists, I think, definitely.
But the thing is, sometimes, though, with Roberts, when he's had the ball, sometimes he's actually often got it in a deep position. So a lot of the time he's having to run at opposition defenders and work hard to get to the final third. And by which point he's often doubled up on as a technical player. One of the goals last season that springs to my mind when you mention about even if he doesn't get the assist technically, but causes a lot of chaos. You remember the goal Chris Rigg scored against Middlesbrough, the back heel at home. Remember, like when I think it was Mundell ended up passing it to Roberts. Roberts causes a lot of chaos in the build up to that, and it means that the Middlesbrough's defence and goalkeeper are completely in no man's land, and then if the ball falls to Rigg to then score I was going to say tapping, but that's harsh. Score the wonderful back heel. Roberts is a big player in that goal, and even another thing last season. You remember the triangular relationship he had with like Rigg and Trey Hume as well. Like that's what I mean. Like that partnership was really, really important. So I'd be prepared to bet that if you spoke to people like Trey Hume and Chris Rigg, they would probably, if you asked them about Patrick Roberts, they would probably tell you how critical he was to their success.
I tell you who you should ask about Patrick Roberts. Ahmad Diallo, he'll tell you how much of a good player he was. Don't get me started.
No, they were brilliant together. The first, I noticed it was when we beat Wigan away 4-1. Both scored in that game, funny enough.
I do always love to beat Wigan, because they've just got a little bit of a thing against us, haven't they, Wigan Athletic?
Yeah, well, I'll not say too much about what I really think, because I know you probably won't want me to say that on a podcast like this. But what I would say is, to be fair, but from that point onwards, I think it was when we beat Middlesbrough at home as well. When they went down to 10 men, Ross Stewart scored and Ahmad Diallo scored. I noticed, Christ, hang on a minute, these two look like they're really on the same hymn sheet. And as you know yourself, even in that season when we were playing the really good football, when Mogger ball, if you want to call it that, was at its peak, really. They were both at the heart of it. Like they were deadly to watch at the best of times. I think even I remember Jack Clark's goal against Hull in that 4-4, the fourth goal, when I think it was Amad Diallo and Patrick Roberts linked up brilliantly for it, and it got us up the pitch like within seconds. So yeah, Roberts is definitely, even if it was the right time for him to go, because ultimately I think if we were still in the Championship, Roberts would be first choice right winger probably for us. Whether people think that he should be or not, I don't know. If we were in the Championship, but obviously that's its buts and maybes. But he's definitely contributed some really, really good moments. Even the equaliser against Watford, the screamer, in the 2-2, which in the end was a vital point because it got us into the playoffs. So, or helped us get in the playoffs. So yeah, even if you can't be sentimental, and I agree with the comments that you cannot really stay up on sentiment. I can't remember who said that comment, but they're right. I think you can't stay up on sentiment. And if Roberts, I think for me it was right that Roberts did go, but it doesn't mean you can say it was right, but still look back fondly on what they did for you. You know, it doesn't have to be one at the expense of the other.
We've got another question from Victoria Burns. If Diarra is fit for the Mags game and we have no new injuries, does he come back into the starting 11? That's an interesting
I love
one.
how Victoria's 2 questions are about the Newcastle game. It's brilliant.
It's just around the corner as well. It's scary.
Well, yeah, no, it is frightening to think about. Yeah, right, so what was the question? Is Diarra fit for the Mags game? We have no injuries to come back to start 11. If he hadn't been out for so long, maybe. But I just don't think he'll be anywhere near match fit. Like, as in to start. I could see him coming off the bench for maybe half an hour if we need him, or for a good amount of period of time. But we've got to remember that sometimes with players you don't want to rush them back too much, do you? Because then what happens if they're not fully fit? Then you get another injury, or you make it the one they've got maybe what's the word I'm looking for? Re-agitate the injury that they've currently got, or whatever it is. I don't know how muscle injuries work on that regard, but I think it's one you've just got to be a bit careful with. So I'd love it though, Victoria. Don't get me wrong, because I'm a big fan of Diarra, and I think he's got the right amount of speed, dribbling, technical ability, athleticism in there. I think he's someone that is just tailor-made for a Premier League club and tailor-made to help you succeed in the Premier League. So yeah, I would love it, but I personally don't think he will, just because of how long he's been out, James. But I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I agree with you, to be honest. So I'm going to move on the question because I want to take one from Twitter, which really interested me. It's from the user SAFC. Yeah, SAFC 454. Curious to see how Sunderland will line up when their African players leave for AFCON. Have you got any initial thoughts on this, Bowers, or do you need a minute to prep? Because I've got the outline of a team if you want me to go first.
Well, I've got an outline of a team if you're playing 4 at the back.
Yeah, same. I haven't got 5 at the back yet, though.
Right, okay. So if I'm going 4 at the back, assuming obviously nobody gets injured, and hang on, so who's injured at the minute? Diarra's injured. Alderete is obviously, I think he's coming back. Alderete got suspended during national duties, didn't he? So,
let's assume everybody's going to be fit.
Right, okay. So everyone who's not at AFCON is available.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do it that way.
I would say personally, how would I line up? I would go with obviously Roofs, Mukiele, Ballard, Alderete, Hume. Now I've heard apparently Gertrude can play midfield, so I'm basing purely off that. It would be Dan Neil if Gertrude can't play midfield, but I'm assuming he can. So I'm going to go Gertrude, Xhaka, and Rig. I'd have Lefay on. Oh yeah, Mundle's back, isn't he?
Well, that's a good shout. I've forgotten about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I keep forgetting about him as well. Every time someone says Mundle's like, oh, blimey, I forgot he was actually existed at the minute. Bless him.
Will he be fully up to speed by then, though? Because he hasn't played for the 21s
no, that's the problem.
Yet, has he?
We got to remember he got injured in pre-season, so that would have impacted his pre-season effectively, wouldn't he? So,
yeah.
I would probably go Gertrude, Xhaka, and Rig in the midfield. Lefay on the left. Mayenda on the right, maybe, and then Isidore up front. Isidore/Roby, but I would say Isidore. That's probably what I would start with. I mean, obviously the depth can be a bit of a concern, but I think Sunderland would have recruited players believing that we will be able to get the points in the games that they're going to be here for. So, just quickly on the AFCON thing, I think a lot of people, not necessarily Sunderland fans, but I think a lot of people what's what I'm looking for? Emphasize it too much. They blow it out of proportion a little bit, as if they're acting like AFCON's half the season. We've got to remember it's up to 6 games. Like, I think Sunderland I'd like to hope Sunderland will be all right, but I think so. Yeah. So quickly, but if I was back at the back four, I would go with probably Roofs, Michele, Ballard, Alderete, Hume, Gertrude, Xhaka, Rig, Lefay, Mayenda, and Isidore. Which I don't think is, which all things considered, I still think that's a pretty good size.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going with the same goalkeeper, the same back. the same back four, Hume, Ballard, Alderete, and Nodi Miquele. I am going, though, Xhaka, Dan Neil, and Gertruida in the middle. I think that's a pretty sturdy midfield. I would keep Enzo Lefebvre on the left-hand side. I would then use either Mayenda or Rig on the right.
Yeah, Rig can go there, can't he?
Because I like Rig in midfield, don't get me wrong, but I just think if he plays on the right wing, that's a bit of a safer option for him in terms of his development, because one sort of error in the Premier League can set you back a goal.
Especially in the midfield, which can be win or lose games, can't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And then I would have Wilson Isidore up front. However, you could have Mundle on the left, and then you could drop Neil and put Lefebvre in there. This is a 4-3-3 we're playing here, isn't it? I think that's how it would look. Another candidate, obviously, would be for Serkin to play left back, and then you could jig the defence around a little bit if you wanted to. So there are other options. We should probably tackle a back five as well, Bowers, because that's how Le Bris has started to play. I don't know if you want to go first.
To be fair, sorry to interrupt, but I think, to be fair, I wouldn't be shocked now you've mentioned it, because if you look at the fixtures, say it goes up to 6 games, right? We've got Brighton away. That's a very. I think a lot of people. Brighton away is a hard game. Like Man City lost there, Newcastle lost there. So I think that, and I know Newcastle's got their away form, but like they're still good enough on paper to get something at Brighton, but football isn't played on paper, obviously. But if it was a back, so I wouldn't be surprised actually if and then we got Man City and Spurs in that as well. So actually, we probably might go with a back five in the majority of these games. If I'm going back five, then I'd say Roofs, obviously. Then I'd probably say Michele and Hume as wing backs. Then it would be Ballard, Gertruida, Alderete at centre half. I then could see Dan Neil potentially playing with Xhaka in the midfield too, if you've got the wing backs either side and you've got 3 central defenders behind you. Just in case, obviously, a mistake does get made, then you've got an extra player behind you to try and bail you out. So I would say probably Xhaka and Neil in that sense, and then it would be, but then there's 5 at the back. Would it be 3-5-2? 3-5-2, 3-4-3? I don't know.
I'm going 5-2-2-1, because he sort of played 2 holding midfielders, didn't he? And then sort of 2 attacking midfielders behind the striker. But you could slice it however you wanted to be honest.
So are you saying 5-2-2-1?
Yeah. So 2 holders and then 2 attacking midfielders. That adds up, doesn't it? Yes, it does.
Okay. Yeah, I can see what you mean. Because then effectively you could say that the 5-2-2-1, it could then turn to a 3-4-3. It's just that the fullbacks,
precisely.
The wing backs.
So I'll run you through my team quickly. So I'm going to go Robin Roofs. I would then go Hume right wing back, middle 3 of Ballard, Alderete, and Miquele. I'd then take a chance at Serkin at left wing back. Ultra sort of defensive midfield to really lock that down. I'd go Gertruida and Xhaka. And then as your 2 sort of number 10s, Lefebvre and Rig, because I think they would allow you to get on the ball.
And then Isidore up front.
And then, Isidore up front, probably coming off the bench. But Le Bris probably has 100 ideas, and that's probably not one of them, to be fair. Because
I was going to say, I don't think it's wise.
What the hell do we know?
What you'll do, like.
What the hell do we know, Bowers, to be fair? But yeah, that would be my sort of back 5 team.
Yeah, I think now you've said it like that, I think I'm finding it hard to disagree with that. Yeah, I'll probably go there. So yeah, Roofs, to be clear, Roofs. And then what you said, Hume, Serkin, wing backs, didn't you?
Yeah. And I just think that middle 3 of Ballard, Alderete, and Miquele is
that's a strong back 3.
Really
that's
solid.
Strong back 3. Okay, yeah, I'll probably go the same as you then. Them 3 at the back, then Xhaka.
The question mark is that you could have Hume at left wing back, Gertruida at right wing back, and then another midfielder. You could have Lefebvre alongside Xhaka, and then maybe Mayenda and Rig, or Mundle and Rig, or you could throw Dan Neil back in there. So it's quite a nice conversation to have, Bowers, because I do actually feel like Sunderland have got a fair bit of depth. Like, AFCON's going to be a pain, but I think we're actually quite well equipped for it.
It's not, unless we get loads and loads of injuries, I don't think it's going to be critical for us, is it? So that's the whole point. Yeah, obviously the depth isn't going to be quite as good as what we have it currently now, but there is still enough there for me to get results in. Like, even for example, I mean, what games have you got during AFCON? So assuming you've got, not everyone's going to be away for all 6 games, right? But you're talking Premier League games, obviously. But you're talking Brighton, I think it's Brighton, Leeds, Man City, Spurs, Brentford, Palace in the Premier League at most. So for me, I'm looking at that. I think for me, as long as you get a good result against Leeds in particular during that run-in, and then maybe a draw or 2 here and there, that's still all right. I still think that's, and especially if we can get a good few results, but points before then Gertrude, exactly. Gertrude played. So this one, maybe this is probably why we signed a lot of these players. And bearing in mind, Gertrude, remember, who was it who put it out? Might have been Jam Sani, legend, by the way. But I think it might have been him who put, it was the best example of 5D chess ever when the recall fee we got for Mark Guiu compared for the loan for Gertrude. Yeah. So there is that way to look at it. But that's quite funny. I mean, it still makes me laugh to this day. But yeah, there is, at least when you're signing players that have a bit of, I don't like to rely on players with versatility too much. I like players in specialist positions. But the advantage of it is that you can have players like, say, Gertrude, it could be right back, it could be right wing back, it could be midfielder, it could be centre half, and not just be there for the sake of being there, but actually do a decent job there as well.
He's really good. He's really so good.
Oh no! Well, I was trying to be. I was trying to calm it down a bit. But yes, from what I've watched of him, he is very, very good. So yes, I think that signing these players, there would have been a hell of a reason for it to actually keep things going along during AFCON and not have standards drop too much, if at all.
Quite a funny question here from Slight176 on YouTube. recall the GOAT Alan Brown for AFCON.
Recall him for the FA Cup third round.
He's quite versatile, in fairness to Alan Brown.
Well, why not?
What did you make of Alan Brown's comments in the summer just after he signed for Middlesbrough in terms of, what did he say? He said that he felt it was harsh that the lads that got Sunderland last season weren't given a chance.
I get it from a player perspective, because of course you're going to want to do it, aren't you? You're going to want to have a chance of playing in the best league in the world, or at least the most popular league in the world. But I would argue that with Alan Brown, I mean, how old is he now? 31, 32? Something like that.
Something like that, yeah. I think he was 29 when he 29 when he joined us. So
yeah, I was going to say he was 21 when he joined us. So no, he wasn't. 29 when he signed. So I think at that point, unless you're someone like a Jamie Vardy who's happened to get to the Premier League late and be a late developer, I think you would have probably been snapped up by a Premier League club by well before he joined us if he was Premier League material, if you know what I mean. Not necessarily, but that's just the way I kind of look at it. I do get his sentiment about how a lot of the players, that he feels maybe that players have earned the right to be in the Premier League. But I think, again, put it this way, players are brutal when it comes to if a club gets relegated. Some of them aren't going to want to stay in the Championship or the next league downwards, or some of them might, if someone does really well in the Championship and a Premier League club comes into them, more times than not, they're going to take it. So the club's got to be brutal the other way around, unfortunately, for the likes of Alan Brown.
Absolutely. Got a question here from James Bowens on YouTube. If we follow this season, we sold Bellingham to fund signings. Who do we sell this summer to fund summer signings? That's an interesting question.
Ooh,
way ahead of ourselves here, aren't we?
Well, okay. Well, I think a lot of that depends what league we're going to be in. But let's assume for a second it's the Premier League. And yes, we're fourth, and I'm still talking about survival. But yeah, so we follow. Yeah, I think a lot of that depends on what fees we're going to get for a player. This is why, for me, the length of contracts is important, because if you're looking at someone like, say, Noah Siddiqui, for example, or Habib Diarra, if he has a really good second half of the season, then because you sign them on a 5-year deal, they've got 4 years left at the point the summer is arriving. So then you could still command a hell of a fee in order to get them, have to sell them in the first place. So I think for me, and I think the way, and you might be correct me on this, but I think the way PSR works is when you sell a player, the entire fee of the entirety of that transfer fee goes onto the financial accounts during which that sale took place. So there's that. But then if you're signing a player, only the first installment of the fee goes off that year's accounts. So, for example, if you sold, let's say, for example, Bellingham was a good example. So what was he got? Was it around, I think, including
30 million give or take, with a few
30 million. But obviously, you include excluding sell-on clauses either way, us to Birmingham, Dortmund to us, etc. Say 30 million. That would all go on I think it's last year's accounts. I can't remember when the cut-off point is from 1 year to the next, but
yeah, it was there was a 3-year period, and I think the 3-year period ended in the summer, didn't it?
Well, it did, but obviously he had to sign to Dortmund to be ready for the Club World Cup, didn't he? So that would have probably gone off on it earlier. So I would imagine that, say, the £30 million there would pay for the first instalment of, say, someone like Broby, Xhaka, Diarra, Siddiqui. Well, Lafay obviously is a permanent signing, so it covers all of those of that basis. So, who do we sell this summer to fund summer signing? Well, I think Sunderland, if we're going to be re-established in the Premier League, like we want to be, and like I believe we should be, if we're ran properly, we'll probably go down a similar route to what Brighton did, where, you notice how every year they always sell one big sale, but it funds PSR.
Funds a rebuild, and it funds a rebuild.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I could see happening. So I could see someone like Siddiqui as an example. I could see him attracting big offers. I'm talking probably 50 million plus, maybe, if he grows really, really well. And he's growing really well already at the moment. But he's so tenacious. He's so athletic and gets about the pitch greatly. And he's a big reason why we've done as well as we have done alongside Xhaka in the midfield. So, and that's another thing. Yeah, Richard, I agree. A lot of these players' resale value will have gone up. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, we call Chris Brown. I love it. But yeah, so I could say someone like Siddiqui, maybe. Who else is there? Roofs, possibly.
I think Siddiqui's the one for me, where he's come in and he's been so good and he's so young. And a lot of the noises we've heard are that Noah Siddiqui was on the list of big clubs like Man City, Chelsea, all of those sorts of clubs, even Liverpool. But for maybe in 2 or 3 years' time, they were sort of watching his development with interest, and they would have pulled the trigger on him when he was further into his career, a little bit more experienced. Now, what's really interesting, if Sunderland have got in before them and gone, actually, we'll be the ones to give him the Premier League experience. We believe in him. We know how good he's going to be. We think he's going to be a revelation. And all of a sudden, I mean, how many games has he played for Sunderland? 10, 11?
Something like that.
How much did we sign him for? Was it 17 and a half or 19 or something like that?
I think including add-ons, it was like 17 and a half, maybe. But
what's he worth now? He's worth, I mean, 25 to 30, but that's also going to get higher and higher and higher in terms of his
in the next
profile.
6 months, it'll probably get higher. That's the thing, unless he gets injured.
And I don't want to sell Noah Siddiqui after a year, but he's the one that I look at and think, oh my God, he could be worth serious amounts of money really quick. I think Talby's another one. I think he's going to be a bit of a longer burner in a sense that I don't think that would happen this summer at all. But I think in a couple of years' time, 3 years' time, if he continues on the trajectory he's going at, I think he could be worth serious amounts of money. And that's quote unquote the model, isn't it? We saw it adjusted in the summer to sign some experience. But fundamentally, I believe a lot of these signings, like Roofs as well, they'll have been brought in with some resale value in mind. Now, they deserve credit for tweaking that model and going after players like Alderete and Miquele, who are 27, 28, Granit Xhaka, who's 32, 33. They deserve credit for tweaking that model because it was what was needed to stay in the Premier League.
Absolutely.
But fundamentally, the club will still want to rely on the academy and on player sales as well.
There's a couple of things there as well. That's probably one of the best ways we're going to be able to attract quality youngsters as well. There goes, for example, SJ says, got no doubt Siddiqui will be wanted by Man City or Liverpool. That's the thing. And Taff said this. Taff was the one for me who first brought this up and sort of made me think about this. That probably one of the reasons we've got Siddiqui, which is a good thing for us, is that we've kind of took a chance on them sooner than what the more elite level clubs will have done. And so, and ultimately it benefits us, because if he comes in, does really well for us, and then gets sold for a vast amount of money, say 2 years from now, say summer of 2027, for example, then not only has it benefited us in terms of the transfer fee we're getting, but it means that he's done so brilliantly for us that we're likely still in the Premier League because he's done that for us and developed so well. So, but if you're looking at the summer, like, Diarra, although he's been injured, Diarra, Siddiqui, Roofs, Talby, another one you mentioned there, there's a reason these guys are all on 5-year contracts, because of all of that sort of stuff. And the big thing for me as well is, you look at the money we spent on experience, it's minuscule compared to probably what a lot of these players will be worth. But that's a really good thing about Florian Ghisolfi. That is pretty much, I think I once made a joke that I described him as the foreign version of Speakman and Harvey, pretty much. Which is that that's what he does. He goes out and finds these really good bargains. So, like, obviously Michele was like, 10 million quid roughly. Same with Alderete. Obviously I'll probably be out by $1 million or so maybe with each player, but this is where you've got all of these younger players that can grow in value. And remember as well, if we're selling players a couple of years down the line for huge money, then the replacements you can get are starting at a higher point in their career. So say, for example, Siddiqui started here, grows to here, and then goes. You could be signing someone that starts from here and grows to further up than that. So that's the best way I can explain it, or try to explain it, if it made any sense. But that to me is a big thing. So yeah, obviously, like you, I don't want to sell these players before they end up going. But I think we have to accept at some point, if they're progressing and really showing the ability we want them to, there will be clubs higher up the food chain that will be after these players.
And Crisco Low makes a good point in the YouTube comments. I can see Dan Ballard 50 million returning to Arsenal. Now, I don't want that to happen, but I do understand the sentiment, because the way he has adapted to life in the Premier League has been nothing short of magnificent. the performances he's put in, particularly that performance against Arsenal, his best game in a Sunderland shirt. Just his form since the Coventry playoff semi-finals have been brilliant. He was fantastic at Wembley as well. He's turned into a proper top-level centre-back. And it got me thinking actually about Ballard recently. And I think we actually have to concede that he's that good that had he not picked up a couple of injuries at Sunderland earlier on in his career, he probably wouldn't still have been here, I don't think. I think he is quite comfortably that good. He's got the pedigree. He obviously started out at Arsenal. But I agree with the sentiment of the comment that scouts and teams will be watching these Dan Ballard performances against West Ham and all of the other good games he's had. And they'll be thinking, God, this kid is worth a lot of money. He's obviously still fairly young. What is he, 24, 25? Homegrown player. Is he 26? A homegrown player as well. He's got a lot of mileage left in him. He's proven that he can do it in the Premier League. You know, everyone's looking for those marginal gains in the top flight, and he's proved that he's actually a goal threat as well, which is quite a novelty for a modern centre-half. So I wouldn't like to see him go anywhere. But I think the only question on Ballard is his injury record, isn't it? Because he does pick up the odd injury. But nice to see, actually, and read that Le Bris has been sort of tailoring a plan around Dan Ballard. There were some quotes that went up on the Sunderland Echo website, maybe it's about a week ago. And Le Bris was asked about Dan Ballard, and he just said that he's sort of on a different program to the rest of them because you can't train him like an attacker because he'll sort of break down. He's not built like that. So it's good to see that sort of Sunderland are handling him quite well at the moment because, I mean, what a player he is. He's just... I've been surprised, to be honest, by how well he's sort of adapted to life in the Premier League. He's been outstanding.
And remember as well, when we play him in the playoffs, he wasn't even our first choice centre-half then.
No, it was Mepham coming into it, wasn't it?
Yeah. About it, because you're comparing him to someone like Chris Mepham, and I really like Chris Mepham. I'm a big fan of Chris Mepham, but he's playing for West Brom in the Championship while Dan Ballard's excelling for us in the Premier League at the moment. So it's mental how football can shift. And it was a big call when Le Bris brought him in against Coventry to drop Mepham, because I think if you asked a lot of people before those playoff Coventry games, a lot of people would have probably said Mepham and 09 the centre-half. So, and I think as the comment I think I said to you on my stream this morning, I can't remember who it was, so I can't remember who I can have to credit for this tweet, but someone said, since the Coventry game, Ballard's been on a personal vendetta mission to become the best centre-back in world football. Or Paddy Power, who I do remember did tweet this, said, if we're going to have an asteroid heading towards Earth, just get Dan Ballard to head it away and we'll be fine. So, you know, he's just colossal. I can't believe it. Maybe what you need to do is, if it gets to 6 weeks from the end of the season and we're already safe, maybe Ballard just gets knocked down, you know, gets a season-ending injury, then he stays at Sunderland for another few years, and, you know, it's totally fine. We're already safe anyway. No, joking aside, yeah, Dan Ballard the rise of Dan Ballard in 2025, the latter half of 2025 has been, and he wasn't a bad player before then. I was a big fan of Dan Ballard before last season. But the level that he's just got to is, I mean, look at the goal against Arsenal. I mean, not just the performance, the goal against Arsenal when he managed, you know, is it Declan Rice he shrugs off to run into the penalty area as well?
Possibly. Yeah,
so if it is, that fair play. And that's no mean feat because Declan Rice is a very good player, outstanding player, in fact. So, and then Dan Ballard has one quick touch to control the ball and then just lashes it like a striker. And I'm just thinking, what business have you got being this good? Like, I don't get it, but in a great way. And then obviously gets the assist for the equaliser and then obviously produces that point-saving block at the end. So it's just Dan Ballard's just been incredible. But the problem with, as you know, is that when these players keep performing, you're getting vultures sniffing around them. So, but that proves that we're doing something right. That I trust if that did happen, I trust the regime to go out and find someone who's even if they're not quite as good yet, are not far off being as good, but will surpass their level in terms of quality. And that's the way we're going to have to. That's the way we're going to have to be ran. And I think with Gazolfi in charge, I'll be pretty confident of being able to find them. But what a player Dan Ballard is! What a player!
No, absolutely. Let's get into our sort of last 2 or 3 questions. So if you want a question answering, please put it in the YouTube or the Facebook comments, and we'll try and get to it. One that piqued my interest though was this: if we end up in a decent position this season, will teams also be after Le Bris? Didn't Brentford try and get him in the summer? I think he might have been on their list, actually, to be honest. Reports at the time did suggest so. Le Bris signed a new contract in the summer, didn't he? So that sort of remunerated him for his outstanding work. So Sunderland do have protection. I imagine they'll have a big get-out clause in terms of if a big club came along, they would have to pay quite a bit of money to get Le Bris out of Sunderland. So I think the club will be covered in that regard. If you're Le Bris, though, unless it's a massive, massive job, somebody a lot further up the food chain, of which there are only 3 clubs at the moment actually in the Premier League. But you get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying. Why would he want to leave? Because this club is actually starting to being built around him in a sense. The team at Sunderland, they all work really well together. Him and Florent Gassolfi reportedly get on well. Kieran Louis-Dreyfus obviously trusts Le Bris a lot more than he ever trusted sort of Tony Mowbray, to be honest with you, in terms of recruitment, all of that sort of stuff. There's clearly a good working relationship with Christian Speakman. The players seem to love him. The fans are obviously adoring of him, given what he's achieved. He seems to really get the area, and he's a very smart man. I don't think Le Bris would leave Sunderland for just any opportunity. Will clubs come sniffing? I would imagine so, because he's doing an absolutely outstanding job. And if I was a bigger club than Sunderland, so to speak, you'd be looking at him and you would be impressed, wouldn't you?
Of course you would be. And that's ultimately the thing. So I think personally, that is the issue. Yeah, I mean that you're looking at someone like Brentford. If we hadn't have gone up, Brentford might very well have got Le Bris. We don't know. That just shows how important promotion was for the football club. But I look at Le Bris. I think you're right. I think unless it's like a really big job, and I'm talking elite level job here, then I don't see why it would make sense for him to leave Sunderland, because I think, bearing in mind, if for example, if KLD is saying this season, our ambition is top 10, or even if not in those words, but a roundabout way of saying it, then Le Bris clearly sees that we're ambitious. So why, unless it's a really big job, and I'm talking, when I say elite level, I'm talking someone like Manchester United, for example. Now, I know that Man United are Man United in recent years, but they are still an elite level club. They're an elite size club. Sorry, that's the best way to put it. So unless a job like that became available for him and they were interested in him, I just don't see why he wanted. And the same equivalent abroad as well. If a huge job abroad came in, you just don't know. So there is that to consider, and there is that sort of there is that worry, of course, that Le Bris is the same with the players. If Le Bris is doing that well with us, then of course people are going to be interested in him. So it's one of them. But at the same time, if they do have them, and it's a bit similar to, I suppose you could say, Brentford to a degree, in that, not that I'm advocating promoting from within, unless there's someone good enough for it, if Le Bris went. But, Keith Andrews isn't doing too badly when Thomas Frank left. And look how instrumental Thomas Frank has been for Brentford. So, it's one of them where as long as you've got a plan in place, we can recover from that as much as a blow, much as it would be a blow.
I think the club will absolutely have a plan in place as well. They have probably planned for that scenario this season, to be honest, not because Le Bris is doing bad or is expected to do bad, but clubs are always looking at managers. They've always got a list of names, haven't they?
Because in case he gets poached from us. Yeah.
Exactly. They're constantly on the lookout. I do think one of the points about Le Bris as well, though, is that he knows what it's like at the club when it goes bad, because of what happened to his former club, Lorient. Obviously, they did very well in his first season, but the rug was sort of pulled from underneath him. He had a lot of players sold. The club suffered relegation. He would probably, accept some responsibility for that. I'm sure he would, actually, just because of the man he is. But he'll be acutely aware of how quickly things can go badly at a football club in terms of how it's run, in terms of recruitment. So I imagine he'll be quite happy with his position at Sunderland at the moment. And let's face it, his influence at the club has only grown, hasn't it, really, since he masterminded that promotion? Because some of the calls he made, in hindsight, were absolutely outstanding. To have that little mini 6-game pre-season, at the time, we were all sick as a chip, weren't we? Because Sunderland were poor and we thought we were going into the playoffs with no momentum. But it actually turned out to be a masterstroke. The decision not to isolate Tommy Watson from the squad after he decided to leave, what a masterstroke that was. The decision to bring Ballard in for Mepham, as you say, what an absolute masterstroke. We can probably point to other things in the season as well. So for me, I think he's earned the trust of Sunderland's hierarchy, and I think it works both ways as well. And I think at the moment it's a match made in heaven. And as you say, it would take a monumental offer for him to go. James Bowen says Xhaka to replace Le Bris one day on YouTube. I mean, I wouldn't be against it. I wouldn't be against it one day, Well,
I was going to say, we reinvented long throws, apparently, so why not reinvent player managers, I suppose?
In all seriousness, I think that job is impossible to do as a player manager now, isn't it? It's too much, surely.
Yeah,
it hasn't really been done properly since, what was it, Ruud Gullit, and then Kenny Dalglish before him. Did Glenn Hoddle do it for a little bit as well?
Possibly.
Vincent Kompany went back to Anderlecht and did it for a little while, but it's so hard to do that nowadays.
But the thing is as well, but even if you're looking at it from just Le Bris, I think you're right. I think you're right. I think monumental, that's the best way. That's the best word to use. A monumental offer is what would have to be required to get him here. And remember, like, the club will have to be well compensated for that as well. So, but I think there's also an element sometimes of the grass isn't always greener. And I think if you just compare someone who's moved recently, Rob Edwards, leaving Middlesbrough to go to Wolves, and I'm thinking, now of course Rob Edwards could go to Wolves and could turn them around. Mathematically, it could happen, but if it doesn't go well, then he's left a club that was very harmonious in his favour, and there was something really good going there. It's just a good example. Or even if you look at a former Sunderland head coach, obviously James knows my feelings on this guy, but Alex Neil, he left Sunderland to go to Stoke, and okay, he's rebuilding himself at Millwall very well, and I'm not surprised they're doing well. But that just goes to prove sometimes I always say, just because someone offers you more money doesn't automatically mean it's the right move. Doesn't mean it's always the wrong move either, of course, but anything could happen with it. But I think the point is, it would take a lot for Le Bris to leave, unless an offer that was too good to turn down came along. And remember, when we talk about signing players that have not necessarily the younger ones, but the more experienced ones who sort of lost their way a bit and given them the love back of football again, sometimes we pretty much did that, I would imagine, with Le Bris as a coach to begin with, because he was coming off the back of a relegation season. He was coming off the back of fans that were probably happy to see the back of him, and we've come in, took a chance on him, and he's ended up being probably definitely our most successful manager or head coach in recent times, and has done a monumentally huge job for us. So there will be a plan. I believe with you, I believe there will be a plan in place from the club one way or another, and that's just the extent of the way Sunderland plan things now, that I could trust, unless I'm proven massively wrong, that they know what they're doing and there's a plan for it if Le Bris does go.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we end it there? Because we've covered a hell of a lot of ground. We've gone for nearly an hour and a half. I am definitely going to have to split this up into 2 parts for the podcast feed. But if you've been with us throughout the YouTube stream and on Facebook, thank you very much. There's been loads and loads of comments, which has been really encouraging. So thank you, everybody that's taken the time. Bowers, I feel like I've seen you more than my newborn son and fiance today, to be honest.
You poor soul. So thanks very much for trusting me to come on here. It's a pretty big thing. Yeah, no, thanks to everyone who has commented. It's been appreciated. But it's just nice for once talking about Sunderland when we're not doing cack. Let's put it that way. Oh, we're actually half competent, which is all right.
Yeah, it's nice. And please let everybody know where they can find you on social media. We did a show this morning, didn't we? Let them know what you've got coming up as well.
Just let you know, everyone, me and James have spent a good part of 3 hours online pretty much together today, which has been great. But thanks, Darren. No, it's just my own channel, which is just type Michael Bowers, Sunderland. That's literally where you'll find me. I think I'm on something like 6,300 and something subscribers or whatever it is. So, if you fancy going over and listen to me waffle about clean sheets less these days, waffle about how good Sunderland have been, which has been lovely, then feel free to subscribe. But thanks very much to everyone who has watched. And thanks again to James for coming on my channel this morning. And thanks for having me on here today. This evening, it's been a really, really good show. Enjoyed it.
Let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely. If you let us know if you want this to be a regular thing or not.
Let's
do it. Maybe if we're going on a bad run, maybe less so. But if we're still doing pretty well, then yes, I would like to.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Michael, for taking an hour and a half out of your Sunday evening. Really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who's watched the stream and commented. Massively appreciated. You can find all of our content over at the Sunderland Echo website. We're also on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all of that sort of good stuff. Don't forget to go over to Michael Bowers' channel and subscribe to him as well. Thank you. We will definitely do another one of these, and we'll see you next time.